Part 11. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida De. Chapter 101. Walking on the smooth road. Yana suddenly felt the ground shaking. Before he could say anything, Satan covered his mouth and flapped his wings to drag him to a hidden corner. What's going on? After his mouth was released, Yana asked in a low voice. Satan looked at the end of the road with cold eyes. There was a borderless group of plate-armored warriors. The armor of these warriors was engraved with 5 different colors of emblems, but the unified flag represented that they came from the same force. 5 elements God system. These plate-armored knights were believers of that God system. But Yana knew that the current 5 elements God system was no longer the 5 elements God system at the beginning of the game. After the entire God system was completely eaten away by the saints, the 5 elements God system became the property of the saints of the human force. Similarly, the attitude of the 5 elements God system represents the attitude of the saints. Is this, who are we going to declare war on? Yana said to himself. He did not expect Satan to answer him, because according to the elves' understanding of the saints, they should not be so unwise. The East is not stable yet, and sending troops to the West at this time will give the various tribes an opportunity to take advantage of it. But the plate armor knights on the road are endless, and I am afraid that it cannot be described in 5-digit units. If it reaches 6 digits, it is equivalent to the 5 elements God system directly emptying all the elites of the family. It is conceivable that if the various tribes suddenly attack the 5 elements God system at this moment, even if the saints react quickly, a catastrophe cannot be avoided. Yana was silent for a while, and suddenly turned his head to look at Satan. Should I remind that human? Although the human was in trouble, he should be happy. But when he thought of the expansion of the power of the 3 source carriers, Yana could not feel happy. Have you added him as a friend? Satan's faint words made Yana stunned. Let's not talk about why Satan knew this kind of thing, but think about it carefully. Yes, he seemed to have really forgotten to add Gao Qiang as a friend. So, it's too late. Besides, this has nothing to do with us. Pulling Yana, Satan went around in another direction and left. To put it bluntly, after being transformed, he should have been a devil. And the devil likes to see the pain of others the most. That fear cannot be borne by oneself alone. Satan glanced at the holy seed held in Yana's arms. He wanted others to feel the same fear as himself, and it would be best if the world was completely shrouded in such fear. This is not good for him, but he is Satan, and he just wants to do it. It's become much noisier outside recently. After taking out the golden eggs again, Gao Qiang and Jasha were lying on the sofa in the Lord's Hall chatting. Since Yana left, the outside of the Forgotten River has become much more lively. From time to time, some people dressed as refugees would gather on the other side of the river. They didn't cross the river, but just built a simple tent on the other side, and looked at the Wangchuan River from time to time. Gao Qiang originally thought that some blind god had surrounded him. As a result, when he went out to get the golden eggs, he passed by those refugees and was not stopped by them. Then he found that those people had no hostility. It was peaceful for a while, and then Gao Qiang let them go. Anyway, as long as they don't cross the Wangchuan River, the 2 sides will basically have no intersection. Your defense facilities, Wangchuan River, hostile targets have been found, and you are being warned. Gao Qiang frowned and sat up from the sofa. After many days, Wangchuan sent another warning. Last time it was the believers of the hunting god, who will it be this time? Is it the refugees outside? Switch Wangchuan River to attack mode. No. Ever since he knew that the fire thunder array was buried in Wangchuan River, Gao Qiang rarely used the attack mode of Wangchuan River. Anyway, getting lost in the Forgotten River and being killed by the fire and thunder array have similar effects. But if you get lost, your belongings will also disappear. So it's better to let them go. When they see the fire and thunder array behind the forgotten river, Gao Qiang is looking forward to their faces. He patted the lazy Shasha. Don't lie down, accompany me to the river. This time, he wants to see which guy is so full that he doesn't want to eat in the future. By the forgotten river, a group of refugees were swept across the shore. Behind them, the crudely made simple rafts were still transporting plate-armored warriors. So, this is the place you mentioned. A man wearing sharp gold plate armor jumped off the raft. He was pinching an old man with a red face and obviously having difficulty breathing. You will be punished if you dare to set foot on the land of stagnant holy power like this, the old man said in a hoarse accent. Retribution, the man sneered. Then he threw the old man to the ground and stepped on him. We are retribution. Under the pressure of the heavy armor, the old man spurted out a mouthful of blood, but he still stared at the man with his eyes. Facing the old man's eyes that seemed to want to eat him, the man smiled indifferently. I didn't believe what the Holy Sun said about the unusual movement in the West, but today I see that you are really brave. Tell me, who ordered you to do this? The man pulled the old man up from his feet again. Spreading the fictitious holy power of stagnation and gathering a large number of believers from various pantheons. Tell me, what do you and your existence behind the scenes want to do? I don't want to do anything. The old man looked at the man with the corner of his eye. I just told everyone that the holy power of stagnation appeared, and no one ordered me to do this. Humph. The man snorted coldly. He knew that he couldn't get anything out of this old man. What conspiracy and tricks there are, they will naturally see the result after they see the so-called holy power of stagnation. In fact, it is not only the elves and other tribes that have plans for the West. The saints have also made a lot of arrangements in the West. Now that the West has the momentum to re-establish resistance, it is not what the saints want to see. According to the Holy Sun, this matter must be dealt with seriously. Even if it is fake, the momentum must be suppressed in its infancy. Lord Howell, the Fire Walker Vanguard has been deployed. A soldier in red plate armor reported on the side. Behind Howell, a huge flag has been erected. The five-color flag representing the five elements god system now has a big holy character in the center. It means that this god system has been completely controlled by the saints. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shida Di. Chapter 102. Besides that, we found a little girl on the shore. While talking, two plate armor knights brought Wang Chuan in front of Howell. Let me go, Wang Chuan said without emotion. Looking at Wang Chuan's empty eyes and expressionless face. It was clearly like a puppet, but it gave people an indescribable fear. Maybe it's because Wang Chuan looks so young. Howell forced a smile on his lips. Little sister, brother is not a bad person. As long as you tell him what people here usually do, he will let you leave, okay? He rarely uses this tone towards neutral units in the game. After all, in Howell's view, the humans who are not Lord units in the war game are not humans at all. They are just props used by humans to win. If it weren't for Wang Chuan's young age, Wang Chuan's fate would not be any better than the old man just now. The fog on the river is getting thicker. Wang Chuan's tone became a little colder. I say it again, let go. If Howell turned around and looked at it at this moment, he would find that there was already a little light from a lantern on the river. And that light is approaching the shore. Boom. Just then, an explosion caught Howell's attention. Howell couldn't care less about Chuan and turned his head sharply to look. Wherever his eyes were, a member of the Fire Walker's advance army had been blown to pieces. The fragments of plate armor stuck to the internal organs rolled aside, and the ground was covered in a ball of flames. The old man laughed. Retribution. This is your retribution for setting foot on the land where the holy power has stagnated. Shut up. Howell kicked him. He frowned and looked at the place where the Fire Walker had just died. As the Lord of War Games, he is not a native of these game worlds. So he could tell at a glance that it was a landmine. Damn it, landmines were laid in the age of mythology. It's not that mines won't appear in the second level era, but why are mines also the last thing in the technology tree? Under normal circumstances, only in the third level war world, it is possible to use landmines in small quantities. Only in the fourth level, a war world that favors technology, can it be possible to use landmines on a large scale. Now there is another question, how many landmines are there? Howell suddenly turned his head and grabbed the refugee who had not yet reacted. His lord path is the gladiator, which prefers the path that adds to himself. This approach may not be suitable for an independent lord, but within a large force, he is definitely a capable general. Early on in his path, he gained the ability to throw extremely far. Now, this ability is at its best. Howell threw it violently, and the refugees were thrown into the air not far from where the Fire Walker was killed. Boom! A huge fire flashed. The refugees who had just fallen were blown to pieces. Howell was silent for a moment, and then looked at the refugees who were hugging the shore with cold eyes. Follow my orders. Drive these bastards in front of us. If they don't obey, send them away. The Fire Walker advance army carried out Howell's orders without any hesitation. Amid the cries of the refugees, they were driven towards the fire and thunder array by Fire Walkers wearing heavy armor. Even if someone tried to run, their legs would be broken and then kicked into the minefield. Finally, a voice sounded from within the fire and thunder array. That's enough. Bihexia came out with dozens of witch hunters. Over the years, due to the characteristics of the Huangchuan River, many lives have successfully crossed the river. It is not like Bihexia has never seen people like Howell crossing the river with malicious intent. He didn't care what Howell and those plate knights were crossing the river for. Because no matter what Howell does, in Bihexia's eyes, he is just a clown. The refugees outside the Lethe River are not the residents of the Wall of Sighs. No one cares about their life or death, and they are not within Bihexia's protection. However, what Howell is doing now is a bit too much. It was so excessive that Bihexia couldn't stand it personally. A gun was pointed at Howell's head from a distance. Do you believe it? It only takes 0.017 seconds for you to go from living to dying. Next, I will only give you a chance to explain in one sentence. Firearms. Howell looked at the fire gun in Bihexia's hand and showed an expression that was indeed the case. If I guess correctly, you should be trying to gather these believers who were scattered by the war to form a huge army made of firearms, right? What the Holy Sun said is indeed correct. A huge threat is rising in the west. Suddenly, Howell grabbed Wang Chuan beside him and blocked it in front of his head. Keep pushing. After receiving Howell's order, the Fire Walker advance army advanced again. But this time they learned a lot better and held the refugees in front of them, just like human shields to withstand bullets. Seeing one after another refugees dressed in rags being buried in the fire and thunder array, Bihexia suddenly put down the gun in his hand. Because he saw who it was that Howell was carrying. Just now, the blush on Wang Chuan's face became very heavy. This time it was not shyness, but she was really angry. From Bihexia's perspective, if Howell and the Fire Walkers he led looked back, they would find that the ferrymen holding lanterns had already walked ashore in the Huangchuan River. The lanterns in their hands emitted a flickering light, as if they were rising and falling with Huangchuan's heartbeat. The land that the ferrymen passed by was also eroded by the fog on the river. Soon, they would walk behind Howell and others. Haven't you noticed anything yet? Feeling the explosions getting less and less, Bihexia couldn't help asking Howell. What? Howell frowned. Until he found that the direction of his shadow was actually in front of him. There was light behind him. Howell turned his head sharply. Behind him, the vanguard of hundreds of fire walkers had disappeared. The pitch-black fog filled the shore. There were no screams or sounds of fighting. Everyone disappeared so abruptly. Suddenly, a glimmer of light emerged in the fog. Wang Chuan's voice also sounded at the same time. "This is the third time I say. Let me go." The fog swallowed Howl, but did not stop spreading, but continued to explore deeper. It was not until it came into contact with the fire-thunder array that the fog stopped spreading and gradually dissipated around. After the fog dissipated, Howl and all the fire walker vanguards lost their traces. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 103. There was no trace of fighting on the river bank. They disappeared very abruptly. At the same time, the refugees who were unfortunately caught in the fog also disappeared in the fog. Only a small number of people who were driven into the fire and thunder array escaped this disaster by chance. No, there was another person. Bai Hexio looked towards Wang Chuan's position. An old man, when the fog swept in. He desperately hugged Wang Chuan tightly in his arms, trying to use his body to help Wang Chuan block the strange and unknown fog. And he became the only living thing left at the scene except Wang Chuan when the fog dissipated. Child. After the fog completely dissipated, the old man let go of Wang Chuan's hand and looked around blankly. All gone. Everyone is gone. It was just a gust of fog. Facing the stagnant holy power, those elite knights wearing plate armor didn't even have the power to resist. At this time, Bai Hexio finally came over. Looking at the old man, Bai Hexio frowned. From what that guy just said, did you find the people who were surrounded on the other side of the river? No, the old man shook his head slowly. I was just traveling aimlessly and telling my own story. So you told everyone the story of the stagnant holy power? A voice came from behind Bai Hexio. Howl and others disappeared too quickly. So Gao Qiang rushed over without stopping, but he didn't see them for the last time. But it was precisely because he came a step late that Gao Qiang happened to hear the conversation between Bai Hexio and the old man. Yes, I spread the story of the stagnant holy power to every place I passed by. The old man did not choose to lie. Hearing this, Bai Hexio's eyes narrowed dangerously. You are fanning the flames. Gao Qiang questioned, so do you know what you did? You buried innocent people here with your own hands. Pointed in the direction of the fire thunder array. If it weren't for the news of the stagnant holy power that made them gather outside the forgotten river, they would not be used as tools for wading through thunder. Even now, the army on the other side of the Wangchuan River may not come. But unexpectedly, when Gao Qiang said this, those people did not look at the old man with any resentment. The old man sighed. If they don't die here today, they will die somewhere else soon in the future. In this world dominated by the major divine courts, how humble the power of mortals is, can you imagine it? You can't. Because you are the strongest and largest divine court in the old times. There is a price to pay for dragging us down, Bai Hexio reminded. Of course I know the price. I have heard too many legends about the stagnation holy power. The old man raised his white eyes. Legend has it that when the stagnation holy power awakens, the glory of all gods will fall from the sky to the ground. The revival of the holy power will reshuffle the world, all existing order will be overturned, and the era of disorder will come. Your goal is to reshuffle this world. Gao Qiang seemed to understand what the old man meant. No, the old man shook his head. I just think that everyone should have a fair chance to live. But you used the wrong method. Gao Qiang looked back. From the faces of dozens of witch hunters, he saw sympathy for the dead refugees. But that was all. Because he sympathized with their experience, he sympathized with them. What will happen to them after this? Hexio and others don't care at all. They are not even his own people, so how can he arouse his anger? Suddenly, Gao Qiang laughed at himself. Looking at the holy flag falling to the ground in the distance, he realized something. The old man was just a neutral unit in the game, so what he didn't know was, in the future, he might not be an enemy of the guys on the other side of the river. Because in the next moment, Gao Qiang had opened the chat interface with the pilgrim. Are you there? It seems that something went wrong on your side. As Gao Qiang told the whole story. After learning that the main force of the saints surrounded Gao Qiang, the pilgrim seemed a little dumbfounded. Because he couldn't think of the meaning of surrounding Gao Qiang. Gao Qiang joined the war game through the saints' request for help, and he was obviously a natural one. Let alone gathering people in the West. Even if Gao Qiang really did it, it would be a good thing for the saints. Taking the lead in seizing the resources in the West, the human side has better combat effectiveness, and it can also compress the living space of foreign races. Why not? Sorry, I'm confirming the situation here, and I will give you an explanation later. After the message was sent, the pilgrims were silent for a long time. On the other side, the human lord who was counting the troops on the other side of the river closed the chat interface with a gloomy face. The questions of several communicators inside the saints have been passed down, but they have no intention of responding. They have just received the news of Howell's death. What the Son of God said is indeed right. The enemy has infiltrated the saints. At present, the saints are not a monolithic group. Apart from the Son of God himself, even the other two sons of God from other pantheons cannot be trusted. Among them, there are many lords who looked at the other side of the forgotten river with cold faces. Just now, after confirming that the lord on the other side of the river was a human lord, the Son of God had explained the reason for the attack. According to the Son of God's description, that person was a complete scum of the human race. He actually fell in love with a female lord of the elves, and came to the West to develop for this. Everything he did was to reduce the resistance for the elves to take over the West in the future. Such scum of the human race must not be left. Outside the war game, all the chat messages fell into the sea. Several saints communicators finally realized the seriousness of the problem and hurriedly sent messages to the other two saints to confirm the situation. Until the thorough investigation was completed, the saints were already in chaos. Among them, in the Holy Light God system, a saint wearing a golden sacrificial robe tightly held the scepter representing supreme majesty in her hand, and seemed to be unable to believe what she knew. She has confirmed that all the lords and warriors who are the pillars of the five elements God system have been transferred to the West. Now the five elements God system has been cut off from the bottom of the pot. As for the remaining 2 or 3 cats, they are just pretending to be there. If they are really attacked, they will be unable to resist. Even if the five elements God system is captured, it is very likely that the arrangements of the saints will collapse. How dare you, how dare you? As for what happened inside the saints, Gao Qiang naturally didn't know. But through the perspective of the Holy Land, Gao Qiang saw something that was enough to make him, make many people in the territory angry. The shrine of the chicken god was discovered by the passing plate armor warriors. They rushed directly into the shrine and peeled open the belly of the chicken god almost without hesitation. At that time, even Shasha was reluctant to kill the old hen that laid golden eggs. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me. Chapter 104. No egg custard for tomorrow night? Gao Qiang suddenly seemed to think of something, and controlled the eyes in the sky to glare at the scene in the chicken god shrine. The plate armor warrior who killed the chicken god didn't seem to realize anything yet. Rather, the remaining plate armor warriors were still slaughtering the chicken lords outside the shrine. Several lords who led the troops also smiled. I didn't expect that there would be extra gains from going out. It's really rare to see such weak war game lords as the chickens. In any case, as long as you kill the wargame lord, no matter how weak the opponent is, you can at least get the guaranteed war contribution. What's more, the guaranteed contribution of the second level battlefield is 300 points, which is 3 times more than that of the first level battlefield. Although this contribution is insignificant compared to those powerful foreign lords, a mosquito leg is still meat. What's the effort to kill a few chickens? Before long, a strong bloody smell had enveloped the sky above the chicken god shrine. Through the perspective of the holy seed, Gao Qiang could even see the blood floating in front of his eyes. Because your holy land has fallen. Data deleted has been angered. Listening to the prompt sound from the war game, Gao Qiang felt a completely different emotion. Because he was connected to the holy seed's senses. As roosters and hens were killed by the plate armor warriors one after another. The emotion he felt from the holy seed was not the anger after being offended, but a kind of satisfaction and happiness. Gurgle. Indistinctly, Gao Qiang realized from the holy seed's senses that he seemed to have drunk something. Those things were fishy, but they nourished him like water and provided him with nutrition. And guided the holy seed to take root and sprout. In a trance, Gao Qiang felt like he had broken out of his shell. He could move. But it was not his own body. Instead, it was the holy seed. Gao Qiang's perspective gradually moved, and no sound was made. Until he got close to the plate armor warrior who was dismembering the chicken god, and stretched out his newly grown limbs. Puff. A dark flesh thorn passed through the warrior's chest, and the heavy plate armor could hardly resist it. What happened? Several nearby plate armor warriors looked at the scene in astonishment. In their field of vision, a fluid monster with a constantly twisting body and a hideous single eye blocked the way out of the chicken coop. The flesh thorn was pulled out from the chest of the plate armor warrior. The monster covered with unknown fluid and tentacles disappeared in front of everyone. Facing the blood that had already splashed on his eyeballs, Gao Qiang seemed to be unaware. Unlike the last time he shot the barbarian with a gun. This time, Gao Qiang pierced a person alive with his flesh. From the perspective of the holy seed, the scene of piercing through the flesh and blood was more like a horror movie played in a 4D cinema. The reminder sound of the war game sounded crazily. Your anti-Kabbalah essence v cruel, started to grow again. Your holy seed, chicken god shrine, has sprouted. Gao Qiang's eye, growth period. Introduction, this is a mythical unit, please bring sufficient combat power to attack. Features, cannot be looked at directly, old god body, mumbling voice, heavenly soldiers descend. Old god body, your body is distorted, and your body will appear when you attack. All witnesses will make a SAN value judgment once a minute. Mumbling voice, you will make an invisible sound to persuade people to be good, and intelligent life forms with too low SAN values have a chance to lay down their weapons when confronting you. Heavenly soldiers descend, you can summon any number of arms units to the position of the eye, only for the old days system. At this moment, the marking effect of the eye seemed to work. Gao Qiang suddenly felt the bloody air outside the chicken god shrine. All the plate-armored warriors who attacked the shrine were wrapped in an invisible blood, which made them look so delicious and mouth-watering. Puff. The eye appeared behind a warrior again with a twisted body. Tentacles stretched out, wrapped a warrior and sent him to the position of the eye. Suddenly, the warrior seemed to see not a big eyeball, but a bloody mouth with a fishy smell. A large amount of blood spurted to the ground, and the eye disappeared again. Looking at the scene in front of them, the only 2 plate-armored knights left in the shrine seemed to have a great shock in their worldview. They are believers of God and warriors of God. Even if they face any evil gods, they will not hesitate to sacrifice their lives for the righteous gods they believe in. But, even in the legends of evil gods, there is no such horrible scene. They are like the chickens they just slaughtered, and they have no resistance in front of the twisted big eyeball. Ah! This time, the plate armor knight finally had time to scream, but he still couldn't escape his fate. The only person left, looking at the scene in front of him, finally lost his willpower and started to scream. In a trance, a certain sound was heard from nowhere. Clang! The sound of the sword and shield falling to the floor attracted the eye's attention. After a while, only the inexplicable blood stains on the altar were left in the shrine. And Gao Qiang's vision was already bright red. He could not see the scene of the plate armor warrior being stuffed into his eyes and chewing food. From Gao Qiang's perspective, he only knew that every time a plate armor knight disappeared, the vision he could see would become brighter red. Your SAN value limit add 5. Listening to the inexplicable prompt sound in his ear, Gao Qiang did not have any idea of paying attention. He himself did not know why he was so calm now. He felt the bloody smell coming from the outside world. He did not think of disconnecting from the holy seed. On the contrary, he was a little hungry. Subconsciously, Gao Qiang put his eyes on the heavenly soldiers coming in the characteristics column. At this time, at the door of the old shrine, Xueran was responsible for helping Xin Qi to get food on a daily basis. Passing by a ruin, Xueran stopped. After a period of familiarity, she found that the knights in this territory seemed to be patrolling in a very rigid route. And every time this time point was reached, it was when the other party passed by here, every second was accurate. Because she didn't know this, Xueran was almost knocked over by the knight's horse several times. But today, Xueran waited for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and even 10 seconds before she realized that something seemed to be wrong. She quickly leaned her head to the other side of the ruins. Instantly, Xueran's eyes widened. She saw the tall knight fell to the ground like mud. The whole person was rotting like a sticky liquid. Brother knight, are you okay? Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 105. When she didn't get a response, Yukaran threw the packed meal aside, quickly lifted up her skirt and ran towards the knight's location. Someone, come quickly. Naturally, Yukazan's cry for help received no response from others. The entire territory of the Wall of Sighs is still dead silent. When Yukazan reached out to grab it, it was already too late. The knight completely turned into mud and fell to the ground, leaving Yukazan to catch nothing. At the same time, in the Chicken God Shrine, Gao Qiang tried to use the characteristics of the descending heavenly soldiers. One after another, protective knights wearing heavy armor and riding tall horses emerged from the eye's fluid body. The Chicken God Shrine, which is as small as a chicken coop, cannot naturally accommodate so many guardian knights. Only a dozen guardian knights appeared, and the first knight to appear was squeezed out of the chicken coop. And outside the chicken coop, the human lord from the Five Elements God system saw the sudden appearance of the heavy knight. Many people's first reaction is not hostility. But, where did these tin cans come from? It wasn't until the guardian knight raised his knight's spear without saying a word that many lords suddenly realized that they were enemies rather than friends. Defense. The shrill command came too late, so that these heavily armored guardian knights were already running. Night guns passed through the chests of the plate-armored warriors, skewering them together like skewers of candied haws. And that's not the end. More and more protective knights emerged from the Chicken God's shrine. Just looking at the crest on their shoulder armor that looks like an open eye is a bit scary. Looking at their coat of arms is like looking at something ghostly. Some lords quickly withdrew their eyes and moved away from the location of the shrine. They were more or less lords on the side of the saints. Their large amount of experience allowed them to quickly sort out a response plan even in the face of a surprise attack. The Earthwalker troops, carrying large spiked shields, quickly organized their lines. Immediately, the Woodwalker troops using pole weapons squatted on the spot and waited. Catching a lone guardian knight, dozens of long pole weapons were stabbed into them. There was no blood flowing out, no screams, not even a soft groan of pain. If it weren't for the resistance brought by the penetration into the flesh, they wouldn't even know if they had really hurt each other. The next moment, the guardian knight fell down. From under his armor, a short flag fell out and was inserted impartially into the soil. Unable to observe from an ordinary perspective, twisted tentacles emerged from where the flag was inserted, seemingly making some movement. Several lords who were paying attention to the situation couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although I don't know where these iron-canned heavy cavalry came from. But it would be too easy to think of sweeping them away with heavy cavalry alone. As long as they are alone, they may not be able to be killed. However, at this moment, a cry of pain suddenly came from the place where the guardian knight died just now. A lord stiffened his head and turned around. The guardian knight, who had been stabbed into a hedgehog, actually stretched out his hand and broke off the head of a passing warrior. Why are they still alive? The soldiers surrounding the guardian knight were also puzzled, and they even began to retreat. Even the most devout believers of the god of death dare not say that they can be forgiven by death. Even the most devout believers of the god of life dare not say that they can stay away from the embrace of death. Death is eternal, so why are they still alive? Click, click. The sound of various parts of the heavy armor colliding with each other was heard. I don't know when, but the wounds on the protective knight who had been stabbed with countless holes by dozens of long-handled weapons disappeared without a trace. He stood up from the ground again and mounted the horse that had been waiting for him for a long time. The knight raised his lance. God's protective knight charges again. Listening to the constant sounds of diminished loyalty in their ears, the lords' hearts were bleeding. Keep going down like this. The soldiers are about to mutiny. No, we can no longer tangle with these tin cans. After reporting the information here to the Holy Son, many lords exchanged looks with each other. Withdraw. Although there are still many Chicken Clan lords who are hiding somewhere but have not been able to kill them. But facing more and more guardian knights on the field, they can still distinguish between life and contribution, which is more important. Good news. Suddenly, a lord shouted loudly. The Holy Son is bringing people here personally. What? Some lords obviously looked a little weird. Good news, indeed, but only for them. But sensible people will quickly relate. Now the Five Elements God system has brought 100,000 troops to the west, and the Holy Son serves as one of the spokespersons of the Saints' forces in this war game. He did not sit in the center, but directly went off the field to participate in the attack. Isn't it a little too hasty? Naturally, many people have advised the Holy Son on this point. But at this moment, the Holy Son couldn't listen at all. The saints have begun to ask him what is going on. Even the other two saints who came to the war game this time began to be suspicious of him. This situation is not good for him. Once his trust in the Five Elements God system is exhausted, he will soon taste the feeling of betrayal and separation. However, recalling the close contact with Qiuwu before departure, Shenzi's face couldn't help but turn rosy. He used to be like other holy sons, walking in confusion the same path that every holy son would walk. Elevate the Lord path and then enter the upper echelons of the saints to gain more victories and resources. It wasn't until he saw Qiuwu that he realized that he was completely wrong. What race, what righteousness! The most beautiful people in this world cannot be let down. Qiuwu's every frown and smile were so perfect. If he could get a smile from a beautiful woman, how could he not be able to kill the princes with beacon fire, let alone play tricks on them with beacon fire? Struggling out of his love and intoxication for Qiuwu, the Holy Son looked at the chicken god's shrine, which was approaching, and tightly clenched the reins in his hands. Before setting off, Qiuwu told him that he would kill them all. So, how far should we kill? Can the beauty's mission be accomplished by killing all the chickens and dogs in the west and leaving corpses scattered all over the place? Fire arrows. What many lords did not expect was that the arrival of the Holy Son did not seem to be a good thing. With an order, teams of crossbowmen directly raised their crossbows and fired arrows at the battlefield where everyone and the guardian knights were mixed together. Those plate armor warriors who were recruited were completely used as consumables by the Holy Sun. Now that the guardian knight has been held back, in order to prevent the guardian knight from attacking the crossbow phalanx he brought, he can only force those soldiers to go with him. Things developed so fast that the lords at the scene didn't even have time to explain the characteristics of those guardian knights to the sun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 106. For a short time, the battlefield seemed to fall into a dead silence. All the warriors and the knights of the church were pierced by crossbows and fell to the ground. But as time passed bit by bit, the knights of the church, who were pierced with several holes, stood up again with shaking bodies. There were even more knights of the church who walked out of the shrine. It was not until the number reached 1,000 that it finally stopped. Now even the Son of God looked at the shrine of the chicken god with a shocked face. He racked his brains, but couldn't figure out how the broken chicken coop of less than 5 meters could fit 1,000 heavy knights. Were these 1,000 heavy knights squeezed in the house to play juggling before? And what the hell are these guys? The Son of God squinted and looked carefully. Under the rain of arrows, some knights of the church had even been resurrected several times. But after resurrection, the Son of God could not see any weakness from them at all. There was no loss, no weakness. It was as if resurrection was costless for them. What the Son of God didn't know was that when he was carefully observing the knight of the church, a big eyeball had already come to the top of his head, staring down at his head. What a nice smell. A smell of Kabbalah essence emerged from the Son of God, which was contaminated when he came into contact with Chiwu. But it was the smell that made him look particularly different in Gao Qiang's eyes. Too many lives had been killed, and at this moment Gao Qiang's perspective of the holy seed had completely turned blood red. The bright red completely blocked Gao Qiang's way of observing the world. Only these delicious and sweet smells would attract him and guide him in which direction he should go. It was obvious. The Son of God was much more fragrant than other human lords. Staring at the Son of God, time passed by minute. While the Son of God was still thinking about countermeasures, Gao Qiang finally took action. He did something that he would never do in the past. Open the chat interface with the pilgrim. Gao Qiang sent a message. Can I take a bite of your son? Can I kill him? What are you talking about? The pilgrim was stunned when he saw the sudden message. He couldn't imagine how Gao Qiang could say such a thing to him calmly. Of course not. Before this message was sent, the pilgrim was already attracted by the exclamations of several other correspondents. Through a short internal investigation of the saints, they finally came to a conclusion that even they themselves didn't dare to believe. The Sun who controls the 5 elements God system seems to have an unclear relationship with the elves. And now all the pillars of the 5 elements God system have been transferred away. Naturally, it is also to please a certain existence of the elves. In an instant, many senior officials in the saints who received the news had a dark face like a pot cover. As a son of the saint, he is still a little too young compared to those experienced senior officials in the saints. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. As long as he does it, he will definitely leave clues. The only difference is the time it takes to find this clue. Unfortunately, the saints had arranged a Lord of the Traitor Path in the Shadow Clan. Although the Lords of the Traitor Path are difficult to raise, it is still quite useful to support a few of them in a big force. Although the matter of the Holy Sun has not been spread to the public. But as long as you search the internal forum of the Shadow Clan's game, you will find a lot of stories about him in some gossip channels. This licking dog Holy Sun has become a laughing stock in the gossip area of the Shadow Clan forum. However, it is such a laughing stock that has mobilized all the core forces of the Five Elements God system to follow him to make trouble. Withdraw everyone. The Saints' high-level orders. Several communicators almost non-stop sent the deeds of the Holy Sun to the various lords under the Five Elements God system. If possible, they don't want to expose all the scandals. It's a pity that the soldiers are bad and the generals are bad. The lords who followed the Holy Sun almost learned the skills of brainless from him. Without clarifying the whole story, it would not be so easy to transfer them back even within the saints. Suddenly, the pilgrim seemed to think of Gao Qiang. Looking at Gao Qiang's unretracted message, the pilgrim thought for a while and deleted the text in the chat bar. Pilgrim, Holy Sun? What Holy Sun? All the Holy Sons of the Saints are in charge of the major divine systems, and none of them go out. If you meet someone who claims to be, or is suspected to be, a Holy Son outside, please remember that the other party has nothing to do with the Saints, and the Saints are not responsible for him. Has the relationship been cleared? Gao Qiang naturally would not fail to see the meaning of the pilgrim's words. As expected of a big force, even at this time, it has to save its face. However, it's time to eat. Before the Holy Sun could react, a big eyeball covered with tentacles suddenly emerged from his head. Several tentacles wrapped around his neck and sent him into the bloody mouth of the big eyeball. The bright red blood soon dyed the ground red. It was only then that the many lords following the Holy Sun belatedly realized the approach of the monster. Holy Sun, is the Holy Sun dead? Just when a lord trembled and spoke, all the lords of the Five Elements God system received a message from the Saints' communicator. It was an intelligence, a disclaimer, and a ceasefire statement. This message stated that the Son of God had nothing to do with the Saints, and solemnly ordered all Saints to immediately cease fire and return to defend the Five Elements God system. They should be thankful. It is they who are my enemy, not me who is their enemy. Watching the scene of many lords retreating in mid-air, the Knight of the Guardian immediately collapsed and returned to the land of the Wall of Sighs. Gao Qiang did not kill them all. Just as he said. This war in the eyes of some people, in fact, did not even trigger the war judgment of the war game. Otherwise, they would have seen another scene. For example, the war weariness accumulated from 50%. In this joke war, the Saints may have lost a son of God, several lords, and thousands of warriors. But at least, they preserved 99% of their strength. As for those who died, Gao Qiang unexpectedly had no emotional fluctuations at this moment. Whether it was his thoughts or emotions, he seemed calm and indifferent. Even if his reaction was slow, Gao Qiang realized that this was not his usual state. However, at this time, the eyes he controlled were still chewing the body of the Son of God. The breath of Kabbalah essence surrounded his mouth. In a trance, Gao Qiang seemed to see some illusions. A tree of life with roots covering the world stood in front of him, and in front of the tree of life, a beautiful woman opened her arms to him. Welcome back, my child. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishita De. Chapter 107. What do you mean, your child? Pushing the woman who was close to him away, Gao Qiang took 2 steps back. The woman was obviously stunned for a moment. But after a few seconds, Gao Qiang felt the ground shaking. The roots of the tree of life surged upwards, and soon, a smooth mirror was formed behind the woman. And in the image formed by the mirror, what Gao Qiang saw was not his own face, nor his eyes, but another existence, an old woman with bright red clothes and extremely wrinkled skin. It was like a replica of the old woman in front of him. And in the picture in the mirror, there was a tree behind him. That tree was also upright, and the bright red roots seemed to be implanted in every corner of the world. But it brought not vitality, but death. The tree of life of the anti-Kabbalah. Gao Qiang said the name coldly. Yes, my child, the woman opposite nodded. Gao Qiang looked at the woman. So, you are Kabbalah. The cruel nature gave him the ability to think calmly. The current situation is not right. Kabbalah should not appear in the war world. Also, although it is not clear how advanced the world of Kabbalah's tree of life is, it must be a fifth order or even higher existence. As the mother tree of the elves, the mother of all the elves in the entire plane. He must not appear in such a low-level world of the second order. So, is the change because I controlled my eyes and ate the Son of God with the breath of Kabbalah? Hearing Kabbalah's unfamiliar name, the woman showed a little bitterness. If you prefer to call me Kabbalah instead of the mother tree, then so be it. Although I can't see your appearance now. But, my child, he is growing vigorously, and you are becoming like him. Promise me, don't become him. Just when Kabbalah finished speaking, Gao Qiang suddenly felt a restraint coming from behind. The bright red roots spread over his body, pulling him towards the reflection of the anti-Kabbalah tree of life in the mirror. Gao Qiang had a premonition that once he was pulled into the reflection, he might really become a part of the tree. Kabbalah tried to reach out and pull Gao Qiang, but it was too late. After all, Gao Qiang was not an elf. As an ordinary human, how could he resist the assimilation and erosion of the anti-Kabbalah essence? At the last moment of falling into darkness, Gao Qiang only saw a group of indescribable strange creatures shattering the sky of the world and entering his illusion. Huh! Gao Qiang sat up suddenly. Lord! Turning his head and looking around, Gao Qiang found that he was lying on the altar of the old shrine at this moment. And everyone was looking at him with worried expressions. Julio, Shasha, Swaran, Zinki, Baihexiu. Almost all familiar faces were there. What happened to me just now? Let me tell you. Shasha raised her hand. She rubbed her chin, as if recalling something. When we were by the river, the Lord suddenly stood there stupidly, and didn't respond no matter how we called him. Then after a while, the people on the other side of the river withdrew their troops. Later, because the Lord was still standing there stupidly, Sister Julio who came over suggested sending the Lord to the shrine. Well, that's about it. Gao Qiang stroked his forehead. The old shrine? Opening the record of the war game, Gao Qiang saw a long list of prompts that he could not receive in the hallucination. Your SAN value -3, -1, -6. You look directly at data deleted, SAN value -10. Your SAN value is lower than 80, affected by the state of mental depression, the growth of the anti-Kabbalah essence V is temporarily suspended. Your SAN value is lower than 50, you fall into a crazy state, and the growth of the anti-Kabbalah essence V stops. Your SAN value is lower than 30, you fall into a mutation, and you gain the mutation ability, Root Vine. Your SAN value is reset to 0. Has your own SAN value been reset to 0 once? But he seems to be fine now. Gao Qiang glanced at his personal panel. SAN value, 105/105. Because your SAN value is reset to 0, the effect of the old family is triggered. Your SAN value will be permanently fixed to the full amount. After reset to 0, it will be fixed to the full amount. Gao Qiang raised his eyebrows. It turns out that there is such a good thing. Why didn't you say it in advance? As for the mutation mentioned earlier, Gao Qiang looked at himself. Fortunately, his body had no extra or missing small parts. The mutation caused by the low SAN value seemed to be manifested in another characteristic. Root Vine, characteristic. Introduction, the anti-Kabbalah source failed to assimilate you. On the contrary, under the influence of data deleted, you mutated to control the root vine, which will sweep away everything that may threaten the existence of the tree. Requirement, data deleted exists in this world. Shasha, attack me, Gao Qiang suddenly said. As for why he didn't call Baihexiu, of course, he was afraid that with Baihexiu's 0.017 second hand speed of drawing a gun, this unprecedented root vine ability might not be able to protect him. Ah! Sasha tilted her head. This was the first time she heard such an excessive request. It seemed that Gao Qiang was indeed confused in his sleep. But Sasha didn't refuse. Rubbing her hands, Sasha grabbed Gao Qiang's collar. At this moment, a series of bright red root vines suddenly emerged under the altar, exactly the same as the root vines Gao Qiang saw in his hallucination. These root vines blocked Gao Qiang and combined into a monster holding a heavy sword. Bang! With a gunshot, the monster was shot and exploded by Baihexiu, and Sasha successfully caught Gao Qiang. Stop! Gao Qiang hurriedly called for a stop. After Sasha stopped, the root vines on the ground that were about to reassemble suddenly stopped. Then the root vines retreated underground, as if they had never appeared. Gao Qiang had a hunch that this didn't seem to be the limit of the roots. Because he saw more bright red roots gushing out from behind the statue, but he didn't dare to move at all under the intimidation of the statue. Not only that. When Gao Qiang woke up from the illusion this time, he saw a few more traces of roots on the base of the statue. The statue, which was still smiling while holding a flower, looked even more weird with the embellishment of roots. At this time, Zhuluo took out a bowl of egg custard and handed it to Gao Qiang, breaking the weird atmosphere. "My lord, you haven't eaten anything for several days since you were stunned. You should replenish your body first." Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 108. How many days? Taking the egg custard from Zhuluo's hand, Gao Qiang suddenly realized something was wrong. How long has it been since I was unconscious? It's been more than 3 days. As he spoke, Zhuluo brought up a few more bowls of light meals. Is it more than 3 days? Looking at the custard in his hand, Gao Qiang suddenly asked with some hesitation, "The egg is an ordinary egg, right?" "Yes," Zhuluo nodded, "I got it from the chicken god." Gao Qiang said that something felt wrong. He watched the chicken god being disemboweled with his own eyes, but Zhuluo said that the eggs were taken from the chicken god. A creepy feeling emerged. Gao Qiang hesitated for a moment, then contacted the holy seed at the chicken god shrine again. After the last experience, Gao Qiang was obviously a lot more careful this time. Once the holy seed makes another attack, he will immediately disconnect from the holy seed. However, after switching to the perspective of the holy seed, Gao Qiang found that the area around the chicken god's shrine was peaceful, and there were no traces of an invasion. The vision of the eyes also returned to normal, as if the previous blood-red patch was an illusion. That's ridiculous. The perspective shifts to the interior of the shrine. Sure enough, as Zhuluo said, the plump chicken god was huddled together like a ball of hair, and it didn't look like it had been disemboweled. Something still feels wrong. Gao Qiang switched the perspective to directly in front of the chicken god. It was only from this angle that he discovered what was wrong with chicken god. At this moment, the chicken god had a pair of dead eyes hanging on his face, staring blankly ahead. This look made Gao Qiang somewhat familiar. If you think about it carefully, Wang Chuan seems to have the same look in his eyes. After breaking the connection with the holy seed, Gao Qiang glanced at the location of the statue. The chicken god's resurrection from the dead, if it wasn't Wang Chuan's doing, it should be related to data expunged. This data expunged of my own is no less weird than the tree of life against Kabbalah. Shaking his head, Gao Qiang estimated that Yena was about to take action as well. Gao Qiang estimated that he would probably start to get busy in this war game. But before the war game ends, something must be done. Gao Qiang turned to Zhuluo and asked, "Do you know where there are miracles in this world?" Advancement in the miracle path requires witnessing the passing of miracles. Although Miracle Path likes to play word games with Gao Qiang. But if you want to go to a higher level battlefield, or join those warplanes, it is essential to improve the Lord path. Juluo recalled it for a moment, then shook his head. If it were on a feudal battlefield, there would be miracles everywhere, but this is the age of myth. Do you think miracles are rare for the age of mythology? Juluo's rhetorical question made Gao Qiang think. In the age of mythology, there were only two possibilities: either there were miracles everywhere, or there were no miracles at all. Since Juluo asked this, it was obvious that it was the latter. In this day and age, nothing can be called a miracle. Apart from... Gao Qiang glanced at the statue. The old shrine, as a miraculous building that came with the stagnant holy power at the beginning, can naturally be regarded as a miracle. Feeling the inexplicable aggression in Gao Qiang's eyes, a tentacle emerged from the gap in the floor and gestured blankly with a question mark. Seeing this look, Gao Qiang shook his head, stopped mentioning the miracle, and took small bites of the custard in his hand. Juluo's cooking skills are still perfect. The chicken god's newly laid eggs didn't cause any trouble. It's just that when it comes to intense moisturizing, some people can't be moisturized. In the life god department, a group of lords from various races gathered again in Lan Yan's wooden house. The lord of the Shadow clan was the first to speak. The main force of the five elements god system is returning, and the other god departments are also providing assistance to the five elements god system during the gap in combat power. It seems that Miss Chiwu's dog-licking brain is really bad. She can't hide it after just a few days of departure. Chiwu glanced at the Shadow clan lord dissatisfied, but this time she didn't say anything. The sudden loss of the support of the five elements divine system caused her to fall slightly behind Lan Yan. Therefore, before Chiwu finds other admirers, she has to pretend to be in front of Lan Yan for a while and maintain the elegance of the elves for a while. Without the tit-for-tat confrontation between Chiwu and Lan Yan, the elves did not make anyone laugh this time. Staring at the Shadow clan lord, Lan Yan knocked on the table. Since he is the representative of the god of trickery, he must have something to talk about, right? Of course. The lord of the Shadow clan looked at the other elf lord beside Lan Yan. It is well known at the moment that even if the five elements god system wants to return to defense, it will still take some time. And in order to protect various sections of the city wall, it is impossible for the saints to let the other gods under their command unreservedly support the five elements god system. If you still set your sights on the west now, you would be too short-sighted. A strange smile appeared in the center of the black shadow. As long as we win the five elements god system, it will be equivalent to us tearing a gap in the saints' defense line. Once the saints are weak, the scattered people have nothing to fear in this war game. The elf lord frowned as he was looked at by the black shadow. He actually disagreed with what black shadow said. If they wanted to attack the five elements god system, they should have started when that licking dog Saint Sun led the army halfway. Rather than waiting until the saints have fully reacted now. As if seeing the concerns in the hearts of others, the black shadow continued. As we all know, the elves control the victory god system, and the Tauren control the war god system. Once we unite, what does it mean? A war that must be won. What is there to hesitate about? Lan Yan rubbed his chin. The lord of the Shadow clan was right, but he always felt something was wrong. For example, what is the use of the Shadow clan? However, at this moment, Chiwu stroked her long hair and suddenly said, I agree. When you want to attack, just notify me. Unexpectedly, the people on the side of the goddess of beauty responded to the call for attack first, and even the lord of the Shadow clan who had just spoken was a little unexpected. After that, without waiting for everyone to react, Chiwu got up and left Lan Yan's wooden house. In her perspective, she was looking at her own territory type. Rebellion Temple. Effect: every time you do something that blasphemes the foreign gods, you can get an extra blessing. Simple, crude, and direct effect. It is precisely because of the rebellion temple that Qiuwu will get an extra blessing from the goddess of beauty every time she blasphemes the foreign gods. Otherwise, with her ability, it would be impossible to develop the power of the goddess of beauty to the level comparable to the god of life. As for why she agreed to the Shadow Clan's call for attack, it was naturally because of this. Entering the heartland of humans can better show her beauty. Is there anything more blasphemous than successfully seducing the believers of the foreign gods? Qiuwu covered her mouth and chuckled. It's just that a holy son died, there will always be more people who like her. This is the privilege of beauty. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 109. Boom. The section of the wall that the Five Elements God system was responsible for collapsed. Under the lobbying of the Shadow Clan Lord, the war against the Five Elements God system was still launched as scheduled. Thick smoke billowed in the distance, and the smoke from the fire burning through the rice fields gave the sky a grey filter. On the section of the wall defended by the Holy Light God system, dozens of paladins holding cross shields were kneeling on one knee in front of the saint. Lord Izir, the section of the wall that the Five Elements God system was responsible for defending has been confirmed to have fallen. Izir nodded, and barely stabilized his body with the scepter representing the holy light. The worst situation still happened. Under the lobbying of the Shadow Clan, led by the Elves and the Tauren, the lords of some small races also united and launched an attack on the Five Elements God system. There was no way. Humans were the most threatening existence to all races in this war game, and naturally attracted more firepower. And the false news released by Izir seemed to have no effect. In fact, the reinforcements sent by the various pantheons of the human race to the Five Elements pantheon were quite limited. The reinforcements on the surface were to stabilize the various races and wait for the return of the Five Elements pantheon. Unfortunately, they still didn't wait. Lord Izir, do you want to send more reinforcements to the Five Elements pantheon? Someone asked in a deep voice at this moment. Izir shook his head. The sun and the bright moon have not made any rash moves, so our reinforcements will probably not have much effect. Among the lords of various races currently attacking the Five Elements pantheon, the larger ones are the pantheons of life, victory, war, and tricks. Once they make any rash moves, I'm afraid we will be the next target. What do you mean? May the holy light bless them, Izir said sadly. The knights behind him understood, and they all raised their cross shields in front of their chests and bowed their heads in silence. May the holy light bless them, the knights shouted in unison. Izir knew that this time, many lords at the bottom of the Five Elements God system would die, and it was even possible that the entire God system would be directly removed from the list. But apart from that, the saints were not really hurt at their foundation. As the war game developed to this point, the gameplay had long been quietly changed by the various races, and it was no longer like the beginning, with the God systems as hostile forces. And if the races were hostile forces, after losing a Five Elements God system, the saints still had the Holy Light God system, as well as the Sun God and the Moon Goddess. The 100,000 troops that went out were still there, and even if they lost the blessings of the gods of the Five Elements God system, they could completely change their appearance and join other god systems. Then the biggest loss was actually the death of the bottom lords and the squeeze of the land for survival. Of course, she did not do nothing. Izir raised the scepter and instructed the paladin behind him. Send the message to the Shadow Clan, and tell them that the Holy Light God system has sent out most of its garrison troops to support the Five Elements God system. But the paladin seemed a little hesitant. Didn't you say you wouldn't support the Five Elements God system? This kind of deception seems to be inconsistent with the virtues of a knight. Izir turned around, looked at the men he had recruited, and smiled slightly. The combat effectiveness of these paladins is definitely among the best in the feudal era. But if you really want to pick out a bad point, it's probably their loyalty, which is always 60. As a warrior of God, the paladin's loyalty to the Lord is only stuck at the passing line of verbal oath of allegiance. Any words that are inconsistent with God may reduce the paladin's loyalty to below the passing line. But, for her, the saint, it is not a shortcoming. Ixier opened her mouth slightly. The holy light never lies. We only have offensive troops and no garrison forces, because the best defense is offense. After hearing Ixier's explanation, the paladins showed a look of sudden enlightenment. As expected of a saint who serves the holy light, her understanding of virtue is one level higher than theirs. May the holy light protect you. After the paladins stood up and left, Ixier turned around and looked at the direction of the five elements god system, which was still filled with smoke. She actually couldn't bear to see the five elements god system being destroyed. She just hoped that this second false news would be of some use, at least to make the foreign races stop for a while. As for the foreign races withdrawing, Ixier still didn't have much hope. To make them withdraw, there must be a major change behind their front line, and this is something that the saints can't do at present. It's broken. Having reached the outer territory of the victory god system, Yena seemed to remember something and slapped his head. Lords can add friends remotely, why do I have to add them in front of them? As he said, Yena looked at Satan dimly. Why didn't you remind me then? If Satan hadn't led him astray before, he wouldn't have thought of this. Why are you looking at me? You didn't ask me. Satan shrugged, looking quite innocent. As a devil, isn't it quite normal for him to unintentionally seduce others? But Yena didn't hold on to it. What he missed couldn't be repeated. If Gao Qiang really asked him, he would just say he didn't know. For now, he still had to focus on the present. After entering the land in the east, Yena was in danger at every step. He had no friends here, and everyone wanted to kill him. Fortunately, through the mutual induction between the source essences, Lan Yan and others had successfully entered the wall of the five elements god system. The three holders of the source essence all chose to go to the front line even though they knew he was coming. No one stayed to deal with Yena. It can be seen that the three guys really didn't take him seriously. However, Satan, who was standing next to Yena, showed a half-smile expression. A trace of fire spurted out of his nose, and Satan pointed to the place under the feet of the two. We are afraid that we can't leave for a while. What? At this moment, several cold arrows shot out from the treetops. If Satan hadn't reminded him in advance, Yena would have been injured even if he didn't die. And the cold arrows seemed to be sending some kind of signal. One after another, elf warriors wearing light iron armor walked out from the hidden position in the woods. On the branches, on the ground. In an instant, the circle with Yena as the center was almost full of people. I take back what I said before. Yena swallowed his saliva. This is not to care about him. The departure of the three source holders is to catch him in the jar. Give me the holy seed. Satan suddenly stretched out his hand to Yena and ordered. There are too many elf warriors now. It is not easy to kill Lord Satan, but it is probably more than enough to deal with Yena, the little bastard. But it depends on whether they have this opportunity. After Satan took the holy seed from Yena, he showed a crazy laugh. Then he directly slapped the holy seed on a bush under his feet. You have successfully consecrated the holy land. Then Satan stomped his feet and ran over the grass head fiercely. Your holy land has been destroyed. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mishida Di. Chapter 110. At the same time, in the old shrine. Since the san value was fixed at full, Gao Qiang moved his residence from the Lord's Hall to here. With Xueran and Xin Qi accompanying him, the shrine was not boring. But because of this, The moment the reminder of the war game sounded, Gao Qiang, who was sitting in the shrine, saw it clearly. The face of the statue of data deleted in the old shrine had several cracks on the golden body. From time to time, eyes flashed in the cracks. His eyes seemed to be smiling. Sorry. Xin Qi walked out of the darkness, apologized to Gao Qiang, and waved and knocked on the statue of data deleted. Then he took out a few pieces of gold, slowly melted them, and dripped them onto the broken gold. The gold quickly covered the cracks, and data deleted also returned to its original appearance. After doing all this, Xin Qi turned his back to Gao Qiang and said faintly, "If the Lord wants to see the Holy Land, go and see it. In front of him, the last incident will not happen again." Gao Qiang was silent. The last incident was about the incident in which the source substance suddenly accelerated its assimilation speed under the stimulation of the holy seed. Suddenly, Xin Qi's mouth curled up with a strange smile. "What are you still worried about? In front of him, you will never be threatened. Maybe you will have some unexpected discoveries." Sure enough, Xin Qi should have seen something. Anyway, he is used to his subjects seeming to know everything. This time, Gao Qiang simply closed his eyes and shifted his vision to the east. At the outermost edge of the Victory God system, Satan was still trampling on the lawn under his feet. The elf lords who kept rushing around were stunned by the scene in front of them. Where is the expected difficult enemy? They only saw a corrupt red-skinned monster. "Well, do you want us to wait until you finish trampling?" A famous female elf lord looked at Yana with a half-smile. "There is plenty of grass here, you can trample it slowly. As long as, you don't run away." Listening to the other party's teasing and meaningful words, Yana smiled awkwardly. Even though he was not very thin-skinned, he couldn't help but blush at this moment. Grabbing Satan's tail, Yana gently pulled it. "What?" Satan glared at him with his eyes slanted. If it wasn't his body, he really wanted to pull Yana's head off and kick it like a ball. "If we don't leave now, I'm afraid we can't leave," Yana whispered. "Not far ahead of here is the base camp of the Victory God system." Although the elves did not surround themselves with high walls like humans, they were not unprepared. Some equipment similar to mobile crossbows were transported by the elf lords through the vine ziplines between the giant trees. If it was just the opposite side dealing with Yana, they would only have more people and power. At the moment, even technology is completely crushed. He looked at the short bow in his hand again. Yana could hardly imagine how he would use this thing to deal with others later. "Don't worry," Satan sneered. The next moment, feeling the resistance coming from the soles of his feet, Satan suddenly hugged Yana and flew into the air. The ground where Satan just stood trembled, and a bright red root vine surrounded an eyeball with tentacles and drilled out from the ground. The bloodshot eyeball looked around. Just when the elves didn't know what to do, the root vine suddenly attacked. Several elf warriors were unable to dodge and were directly bound by the root vine, then pulled underground and disappeared from the sight of many lords. The elves operating the mobile crossbow on the rope didn't know what to do for a while. Looking at the twisted root vines on the ground and Satan suspended in the air, it was difficult for them to choose their attack targets. However, they soon didn't have to think about it. Several dark red arrows flew past and pierced the neck of the elves on the mobile crossbow. Under the stunned eyes of many elf lords. On the surface covered with roots and vines, the elves who were dragged down stood up again from the roots and vines. But at this moment, part of their flesh was assimilated into dark red wood. There were even branches growing from their necks. Looking at the elf warriors with bloodshot eyes, somehow, the elf lords in the distance suddenly felt a little flustered. At this time, Gao Qiang took over the perspective of the eyes. "Is this the location of the Victory God system?" Through the holy seed, Gao Qiang saw the elves who looked at him with horror. To be honest, the place that Satan chose for him was really not good. Originally, according to Gao Qiang's expectation, he thought he would give the victory god system a central explosion. In the end, he thought too much. Yana, like him, was like a big light bulb in the eyes of other source holders, and he couldn't hide even if he wanted to. But the data of this eye made Gao Qiang a little interested. After the Holy Land was destroyed this time, the eye that grew out was actually different from the one in the chicken god shrine. Gao Qiang's eye, growth period. Features, indescribable, heavenly soldiers descend, Lord of the Three Realms. It seems that the power of these holy seeds is not fixed, but randomly drawn from the mythological attributes of data deleted. Due to Gao Qiang, data deleted has some attributes of the root vine, so the characteristics this time are more or less biased towards the root vine and have changed a little. Lord of the Three Realms. Introduction. As the Lord of the Three Realms of Heaven, Earth, and Man, you will have three unique attributes respectively. Heaven, you will not be able to enter the unobservable state, and all people who see you will make a san value judgment every minute. Intelligent life with too low san value will enter a crazy state. Earth, the root vine will defend your authority, and root vine soldiers will appear around you from time to time. Human realm, enemies who touch your body have a chance to be assimilated by you. Because of the different characteristics, the holy seed form controlled by Gao Qiang this time is also different. Compared with the eye in the chicken god shrine, Gao Qiang has lost the ability to move his perspective at will. If Gao Qiang felt like a hunter hidden in the invisible when he entered the eye's perspective before, at this moment, he is like an ancient tree rooted in the ground, or a king sitting firmly on the throne, or a huge monster that looked at the ants with greedy eyes. At this moment, just like last time, the holy seed brought the feeling of hunger again. It made Gao Qiang look at the little elves not far away, just like walking French fries. But this time, cruelty was not aroused again, and Gao Qiang did not open his bloody mouth without any worries like he did before when facing the holy sun.